Good afternoon, everyone. Um, I have the pleasure of welcoming you this afternoon to our virtual book launch of Ambahan, a Love Story, a book of poetry by one of our very own members, Quintin Pastrana. And we have a very distinguished panel for you today. On behalf of Manila House, I'd like to welcome you. I'm Bambina Olivares, the Director of Programming. Before we start, I know this is quite maybe an obscure form of poetry for many people. So we're just going to give you a little taste of it now. And then so you'll kind of get the feel of what how kind of groundbreaking this book is actually, and what both Quintin and Lolita Delgado Fansler, who is the founding trustee of the Mangyan Heritage Center, and as well as Danton Remoto, who translated the poetry into Tagalog, what they've achieved. So, Quintin, would you like to share?
Sure, I'll share it in a few seconds.
I think you need some sound. Quintin, is your sound on? Quintin, check your sound, please.
Okay, do it again. Now.
Kuno ti altang ni katang madiling ban ni ulang madikagnan og saliw ya di huywan mga bugtong lumbadan. Marmay di sa tuwangan maskin nga haragduyan sa lagan numaayan. Nugbong gutulasihan pagyam tukon uwayan pagbayabason kaywan ni suyong ibansayan. Talad no paayon wan gislabong tagibasan kautaw magdamguhan kisab sa malanbungan rusas maganitayan lawan udindong udbaybay man para unyawayan wan magkonkonot tilabang kanak magduyan o naging raw pigdan isip paraw handuma timay landoy subungan paglandoy subungan timay bahawas sandan pagbahaway sandan ako na kan magduyan malukalawa malngan lumbat indakat bungan surirong digpan langwan aramnum tumagod ngan ud indong ud baybayan tamnum gungaginan surirong magpanlangan.
Okay, Bambina, over
Thank
to
you,
you.
Quintin. Thank you, Quintin. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that was a sample of a taste of what the Hanunuo Mangyan poetry sounds like and looks like. So it's both a written and oral tradition, and written quite extraordinarily, etched on bamboo poles. And Professor Nestor Castro, who is a professor of anthropology at UP Diliman, will also talk to us a little bit more about that later. I'd just like to acknowledge at this point our partners for today's program. FEU, who are the publishers of the book, Far Eastern University. And I believe we're very honored to have the chairman emeritus, Lourdes Montinola, joining us today. And We're also partnering today with Asian Society Philippines, and the executive director, Joy Alampay, is joining us too. And Puma Podcast with Robbie Alampay. So before I turn you over, I just want to Quintin, I just want to, or Lolita actually will start the discussion. I just want to bring you back to 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago, when Manila House actually launched Bamboo Whispers, a book about this Ambahan poetry, edited by Lolita and Quintin. And I think this was actually a little bit of a life-changing experience for Quintin, because from his discovery of Ambahan poetry, he actually decided to start writing in Ambahan, in the Ambahan style, which is, he'll explain it to you, I believe it's a seven-syllable meter of poetry. So Lolita, who is the founding trustee and of Mangyan Heritage Center, would you like to take the floor now? I think you have to unmute, Lolita.
The Wi-Fi works. The chanting that you heard, Anton Posma, who was an anthropologist and who lived with the Mangyans for over 60 years, he tape recorded 20,000 to 30,000 ambahans. And when my son started the Mangyan Heritage Center, we were able to give the U.S. Library of Congress all of these digitized ambahans so that they will be preserved forever. At least we're sure of that. And the Mangyan Heritage Center is trying to promote a culture that's slowly dying, because the young Mangyans would rather text instead of learn their syllabary and their script, so that they can write Ambahan, which has a special language. So it's an effort to keep the young interested in their culture. The way we Filipinos have also lost a lot of our past, whether we're Tagalogs or Ilocanos or Visayans. The young don't want to learn as much of the past, and so we lose them, and that's what's happened with the Mangyan, which is what we in the Mangyan Heritage Center is trying to do. And we are trying to do it. And then we're so happy that Quintin has used the Ambahan form, which is 7 syllables per line, and found that he could express his poetry very easily with the Mangyan style of 7 syllables. So for us in the Mangyan Heritage Center, it's wonderful that a young, sophisticated, cosmopolitan poet was able to use a traditional form to express what is very urban and very modern. And unlike the Mangyan poetry, which is very earthy and just basic and natural, but it's still beautiful. And so let me quote an Ambahan that I love. You once were passing this way. It's not long since you've been here. Your footprints are still around. And we feel that Quintin will keep the footprints of the Mangyan alive through his poetry. So Quintin, I guess, Quintin and I worked on the Bamboo Whispers, which I had conceptualized. We want to promote poetry, but it's not a topic or it's not a form of literature that's very popular. So this one, we made it in we have the Mangyan Script, the original Mangyan poetry, with the English translation by award-winning poets. And we had, it started with Anton Posma, and then Sylvia Mayuga and Marne Quilates. And then Resti Pitogo, who's a Filipino poet. He translated direct from Mangyan to Tagalog. And we have a Spanish translation. So it's 4 languages and 2 scripts, and it has won 2 awards. Quintin worked with me on the book, and influenced his poetry. So I think it's going to be alive because of young people like Quintin who will try their hand at writing poetry. Quintin?
Thank you very
And
much.
maybe we'll get the Mangyans to do the same.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Tita Lolita. First of all, this book would not have been possible without two institutions. First, FEU took a chance on the book. So Chairwoman Lourdes Montenola, Gianna Montenola, Lance Caparal, head of FEU publications, and Gwen Galvez of marketing, and all the team who's put together. Hill Verheles also, who made the wonderful art of for the book. Thank you very much for bringing this incarnation to the world. Secondly, this would not have happened without the Mangyan Heritage Center, and this is also where I get the handoff to Nestor and Danton later, because the cultural sensitivity is there, the recognition, the attribution, honoring that tradition that we want to bring to the 21st century. It would not have happened without a free and prior informed consent process through the Mangyan Heritage Center with FADAG, which is the Council of Elders with the Mangyan, to access, to learn, and to be able to bring that poetry and interpret it as well to the world. So I want to thank Kuya Daay, Emily Lorenzo Katapang, Lolita Fanzer, and Quint Fanzer, who, by the way, was I was a co-alum of mine at Georgetown, and the book will go into expanding the library of manuscripts um, for the Mangyan Heritage Center, so the kids, the third and fourth generation Mangyans, will be able to learn more about their script and honor it, and at the same time have a community library in Bulalakaw, Mindoro. So that's the provenance of the book. As regards the poetry, I think it's the most versatile poetry in the world. I'm not exaggerating. When I was taking my MFA at Oxford, one of my professors said, you have to find your own voice. And it was very difficult because our colonial history is basically took away a lot of the provenance and the source of our poetry and our literature. And, interesting enough, a lot of that was from indigenous peoples and not the lowlanders. A lot of this also was from women, from the Babaylan. And there's a lot of tradition that is still blurred and buried under so much colonization that I think this is just one small effort to be able to unearth that and bring it to the world in a 21st century modern way. Tita Lolita was probably exaggerating about the cosmopolitan and young. So I'm not so young, and I'm certainly not cosmopolitan, but I do have access to the poetry. It's versatile. As one of my tutors at Oxford said, 7 syllables, heptasyllabic poetry is like the spread of the human breath. And at the end of the day, it becomes very versatile, which is why the Mangyans, beyond carving it into bamboo, when they speak it, it's like an ordinary conversation. It's not like a balagtasan or a villanelle or a haiku where it's pretty syncopated or very, very artificial in a certain sense of the ear. But if you think about Mangyan, Hanunuo Mangyan poetry, the Ambahan, that heptasyllabic 7-syllable verse allows you to speak about it in a very conversational way. And that's what I was hoping to capture in the book itself. So I'm very happy to be able to serve as someone who's trying to bring it to the 21st century while honoring the tradition. And more importantly, do that with friends who have honored the craft. And one of them is Nestor Castro. I'll introduce Nestor Castro first, and then Danton will take it at the end. But Nestor is an old friend of mine from my energy days. And he and I had gone through free and prior informed consent processes up in Kalinga and up in Mangkayan, Benguet for our projects. But at the end of the day, it also taught us the sensitivity of honoring the local culture. So Nestor will talk more about this honoring of that tradition and the idea that tradition can be universalized and made new. Nestor, go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon to everyone. So I'm Professor Nestor Castro of the University of the Philippines Department of Anthropology. So the Ambahan is part of the intangible cultural heritage of the Hanunuo Mangyan, and I would say of the Filipino people in general. So the Hanunuo Mangyan is but one of the many ethnic groups in Mindoro Island. There are other Mangyan groups, and some groups such as the Buhid Mangyan, they also have somewhat similar tradition, the Urukay, which is not so much studied. Maybe that could be a next project. But what I'm happy with this book by Quintin, so it's so the Ambahan is written by the Mangyan, mainly for the Hanunuo Mangyans themselves. But in this case, it is a non-Mangyan author, but following the basic rules of what Ambahan poetry is about and sharing this to the world. Basically, it would have the same features. Its metric style is the same. It's focused on love, on love. Okay, so this is a love poem, and of course, Quintin wrote it in English, and so that and Danton has translated it into Filipino, so that it will be more accessible to other people, not just to Filipinos, but to the world. As Lolita mentioned, the Ambahan has a problem of being endangered because the young Hanunuo Mangyans are no longer interested in it. And by sharing the Ambahan to the rest of the country and rest of the world, we hope that it will get more popular, will have more adherents, and through that, it will eventually come back to the Hanunuo Mangyans if they see that it is being appreciated elsewhere. Hopefully, they themselves will revive this tradition and continue it among their communities. So it is up to the readers who will judge this Ambahan written by Quintin conform to a traditional type of Ambahan. So let me end with that. And of course, I believe uh, that any intangible cultural heritage is not something that is fixed and static in the past. It is something that continuously evolves as it goes into a more modern world. And our guarantee that this tradition will continue is by continuously using such types of poetic and artistic expressions, such as the Ambahan. So, this early, I would like to congratulate Quintin, Danton, and Lolita, and the rest who are involved in this publication. Congratulations to all of you.
I think Quintin, thank you, Professor Castro. Quintin, I believe you will, before we listen to Danton, you're going to read a little bit of your poetry.
Oh, yeah, I'll save it for the end. We will just
You'll save it for the
we'll just
end.
do the yeah. But I just did want to just segue into Danton quickly for with some personal context. I mean, Danton and I used to share the same TV studio before with the Kapatid Network. So he was in TV5, I was in Bloomberg, and you know on the odd conversations in between broadcasts, a lot of it was poetry, and Danton was the one who encouraged me to really try to find a voice that was very unique and indigenous, not to be a slave to, for example, foreign metrical verse. And at the end of the day, I think that plus the advice I got from school, I mean, that helped me go in that search to find something. And I think the Hanunuo Mangyan's gift is so versatile that I was able to access it. And I think it's also fair to say that anybody can as well. So Danton, thank you very much for that encouragement. Go ahead.
Uh, Hi, good afternoon to all of you. I first read about the Ambahan in the textbook of Bienvenido Lumbera at the Ateneo, Philippine Literature in English. And I was shocked by the clarity of the images and the beauty of the poems. I was surprised by it all. And then later, I read the book by Anton Postma on the Ambahan, and I appreciated deeper the beauty of the Ambahan. And then in 2017, Quintin, I worked with Quintin in. It's funny because every 7 a.m. we're in the washroom washing our faces to wake up because he had a TV show at 7 a.m. I had a radio show at 7 a.m. We were hardly awake, no? So we would tell ourselves, when kaya will our broadcast careers finish? Para we can do the things we want to do, which is to write, no? So in 2017, he said, "Can you help translate some of the Ambahan poems?" I said, "Sure, okay." And we did that. And then when he came back this year to the Philippines, it's like a full circle. He said, "Can you translate to Filipino?" I said, "Sure," but because I'm with Quintin, he's like my brother, but I'm very strict with him. So I tell him, "Quintin, I will translate, but I will edit your poems because your poems are very social, no? I mean, you have to go down to earth." And so so even as I was editing, I was translating, I was editing, had notes for him. "Oh, I'm sorry, but can you please change this word to this word?" He's a very good I think student because he follows someone older than, I mean, he is very open to changes in the text. No? That's what I like about working with him. He's very open-minded and transparent. So these poems are, as Lolita said, very modern, cosmopolitan. The concerns are extensions of what the Ambahans talked about: love, loss, relationships. These poems are like 21st century rewriting of the concerns of the Ambahan. And I would like to thank Quintin for this. Quintin, Lolita, FEU. We would like to thank Gianna and of course Lourdes Montinola, all of the people, Lance who helped in the production, all of the people who helped make this book a reality. This is a fast book. We really finished in record time. Sabi ni Quintin, "Oh, there's a pandemic. We have a lot of time to do this." So we really finished it and launched it before December 16th. So thank you to all of you. It's a pleasure working with all of you.
Thanks, Danton. I just want to say something. For those who ordered the books are being delivered to us from the publisher on December 18. So you'll be receiving copies soon after that. So Quintin, are we going to read some poetry right now? Because it's very intriguing, this whole seven-syllable.
Yeah, we could. I mean, I'll leave it to you, Bamina. But if there are any questions from the audience, or that you have something in mind to set more context before we go to the reading,
maybe maybe they can listen to what it sounds like, because we've been talking about the seven-syllable meter. And I mean, if you're actually really counting in meters, and you go back to poetry, the seven-syllable is the second line of the haiku, right? So
yes.
That's what it sounds like. But you put it in an entire verse, so we want to kind of listen to what rhythm it would have in that case.
Yeah, thanks. I realize it's like looking at a car and forgetting that we have to drive it. So here's so I guess we'll start with that. And if anybody has questions about it as we go along, we're happy to talk about the poetics and also the background of that. So the first poem, and I did it alphabetically. The book is done alphabetically, so you don't see the narrative of what happened to this protagonist's love story. In fact, it's so unshackled that the individual poems speak for themselves, and you can make do and make your own interpretation what's going on, right? So the first poem is called, we're doing a third of the book. So the first poem is called Autumnal. And Dante will translate it after that. Okay. Autumnal. Oh, well, actually, wait, sorry. I just want you're gonna hear me talk some background first. Some poems can be sung as anthems or funeral dirges, depending on the writer, right? Or promises or even marriage vows. But this is a little more of the latter pair, and I hope I aim to keep it. So, Autumnal. My most priceless reward is to inhabit and stretch time like a first, now threadbare coat. My elected mandate is to know you felt looked after, chose to come away with me, border and nourish the space, far from the stench of power, of clickbaits, of crumbs and vapors. My center had been taken from me and churned inside out, then burned into antidote, like the leaves in their browning, christening your naked earth. Danton, over to you. You're mute.
Danton will just unmute.
I tried to make it fit into the seven, the heptasyllabic line. Tila taglagas, Mahalaga kung mabuhay at pahabain ang panahon tulad ng una may lumang Amerikana. Pinili kong siguraduhin ramdam mo may nag-aalaga sa iyo. Sumama ka man sa akin, lagyan ng hangganan palaguin, espasyong ito. Malayo sa gulo ng kapangyarihan, pain at tira-tira lamang, singaw. Ang aking sentro'y tinanggal sa akin, inikot ng malalakas na puwersa at sinunog para ipaglaban sa lason. Tila mga dahon, nagiging kayumanggi, nagbibiniyag sa lupang nakahubad.
Did you want us to go on?
I just have a question. It's 7 meters, right? I mean, 7 syllables.
7 syllables, yeah.
But there's no length to the poem. It can be as long as you want.
Yeah, my understanding from Tita Lolita and Nestor is like the Mangyan didn't have a cap on the number of lines. They just had heptasyllabic lines, his syllables. And then what I just basically did with my poetry is I put a little more convention by having one stanza be 7 lines, and then having no more than 3 stanzas. That's just a little convention that I added, just a little, make it a little more tight. Tita Lolita, Nestor, it is true, right? The Ambahan can be as organic as you can have as many lines or fewer lines as possible, right? I guess that's a yes. Yeah, yeah. And Nestor, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, that is true, Quintin. As a matter of fact, in the Ambahan, there would even be some exceptions.
From the line in, because he talked about a leaf towards the end. And I'll read from Bamboo Whispers, where we had, the book which Danton also helped improve the Tagalog translation. There's one, just the last 2 lines of an Ambahan, where it goes, I am like a fallen leaf, blown about by every breeze, which is like, I think, similar to what Quintin had read. But the Mangyan is very simple, talking about himself.
Thanks, Tita. Nestor, you were saying?
My internet.
I said you were correct that there's no limit to the number of lines.
But choppy, huh?
In the Hanunuo Mangyan Ambahan, there would even be some exceptions. There would be like an introductory line can even extend to more than 7 syllables. And the end would even be shorter than 7 syllables. But these are more exception to the rule. So generally, it's 7 syllables per line.
They pretty much stick to the 7 syllables, but the number of lines can be anywhere from 2 lines to 100 lines. Quintin limited himself to 7 syllables per line and 7 lines per poem, right, Quintin?
Yes, Tita. Yeah.
But the Ambahan is 7 syllables per line, and that's what we tried to do with Bamboo Whispers, was to make it all 7 Spanish or Tagalog. But like in English and definitely in Spanish, there are words pronounced or one, like I am or I'm. And so that's how you play around with the 7. If you need to make it 7, you can say I should instead of, I.
Well, these are, I think, all tricks that
it's
writers and
in
poets.
that sense that I learned how to write haiku and Shakespearean sonnets in college. I mean, it was just one of the things we learned when we had English literature. But we were never taught about the Mangyan Ambahan or the other Filipino indigenous people's poetry. And that's what's so sad, and that's what we're hoping, that teachers will learn about the Mangyan Ambahan and teach those to the Filipinos.
Danton, was it difficult to do the translation? Because obviously it wasn't very literal, right? And I think like with Filipino, with Tagalog, you can have one word with so many syllables. So was it difficult to look for the right word to fit into the meter?
Yeah, I had to consult several dictionaries. I had an online dictionary and I had the Panganiban and then the UP dictionary. I had to consult 3 dictionaries to get the, because in the Ambahan you really have to count. I think I failed in some lines because like in some lines, if it's like um, 8 syllables, I would just tell myself, oh my God, I think I'm not doing it right. But I tried to fit them into the 7 line. And later, Quintin counts very well, better than me. He also counted, and then he moved some lines down because we have to follow the 7 syllable per line template of the Ambahan. It's not difficult, but it's really more like, because in translating Quintin, especially some of the words because the Ambahan is a pre-Hispanic form, and his concern sometimes merong surfing, there's surfing, or the references to Western culture. Sabi ko, oh my God, what will he do? And there's no Tagalog word for these terms, no? So I had to either follow the spelling in English or to look for a Spanish word. As my grandfather, who's part Spanish, told me, if all else fails in translation, resort to Spanish. So what
So
I did
what word
with
did
some
you
of
use
the
for
words that had
surfing?
no. Oh, I don't remember. Quintin, what is the word cloud news?
I can use.
Why don't
Yeah,
you read that
I guess
one?
because there were 50 poems, so it's not the easiest to remember. But yeah, yeah. So, Pami, did you want us to continue along this way?
Why don't you read another one also,
Okay.
just to also get a better feel of how adaptable that poetry is to modern
Sure.
life, like you said.
Okay, sure. I'll pick another one. This one a little longer. One of my favorite authors, Garrison Keillor. He had this groundbreaking book called Good Poems, right? Very simple. And basically he was talking about the conceit of some poets wherein they try to make it hard to understand, or they try to make it complicated and put so much artifice. And that goes against what good poetry should be, which is supposed to be simple, understandable, very resonant, cuts through the cant, and more importantly has a narrative line. I mean, to say all the good poems have a storyline to it, and I think Amban, with its heptasyllabic structure, and at the same time the fact that it is always talking about a Mangyan story or a person's perspective of the world and how he or she belongs in it, that lends very well to narrative poetry, which is my strength, relative strength. My professor at Oxford, Jane Draycott, the poet, was saying a good poem is what transports you from A to Z in one poem. Basically, it transports you to a special place the first time you read it and the time that you're done. So I'm hoping that at least some of the poems, certainly Danton's translation will do that, will transport you to the special place. And this is a true story, and it's about Batanes, interesting enough, where another indigenous culture resides. The poem is called Batanes. By Lawakan airstrip, the chance passengers listened to this gray cassette tape player. These are Ibatans, she said. They were warbling like sparrows. So I tell the old lady, her wiry fingers pressing stop. One day, I'm going to make it up north. And she tells me, you will. Only when love sings like this inside. I was held up by dozens of detours, dark dreams and years. That memory was a promise that I could not bear to break. Then the wind came again, as when my veins are open, when I've had too much to drink or feel, taking me swiftly to these unknown, mordant isles. They say the best way towards you is away from you, but they, nor I, never knew what that meant until my eyes washed upon your shores. My breathing, a dinghy, tethered to the waves, until it turns to mist that embraces shadowed roads, these veins that trace your mottled coasts. My mind combed through your pastures, through the cobbled walls and roofs. Limbs traced lime that hold shelter like a spine, bearing the books we carry with us toward a lighthouse, its iron door opening slowly, fully, by this ageless gallant woman, her face beautifully coarse as the vines of her bakul that frames laughter golden as the sun, who chants to us with an indelible octave. Diyos mamahes, what's kept you? Danton?
Anton, is that
Bataan,
very challenging to
I'm sorry to have flicked it on Danton, but yes.
yeah, I think I sweated blood with Batanes. So this Batanes, Batanes, sa paliparan ng luwakan, nakinig ang nagbaka sakaling pasahero sa abuhing cassette player. Ito ay mga ibatan, sinabi niya. Umaawit sila, parang maya. Sinabi ko sa matanda habang pinindot ng daliri ang hinto. Isang araw ay makakarating din ako sa norte, sabi niya. Oo, isang araw. Kung pag-ibig ay umaawit tulad nito sa iyong loob. Isang dosenang daang pabaling-balik ang harang. Mga panaginip na madidilim at mga taon. Ang alaalang iyo'y isang pangako na hindi ko kayang baliin. At muling nagbalik ang hangin, tila mga ugat na nakabukas. Kapag marami na akong nainom o may nararamdaman, dinadala ako sa mga islang hindi kilala pero nakasusugat. Sabi nila, mabisang paraan papunta sa iyo ay ang paglayo sa iyo. Pero hindi nila alam, hindi ko rin alam, ang ibig sabihin nito hanggang dumating ang paningin sa iyong dalampasigan. Hininga ko'y parang bangkang sumasabay sa kumpas ng alon hanggang maging dagim na yumayakap sa daang madilim. Mga ugat na bumabakas sa batik-batik na baybayin. Parang suklay ang aking isip na dumaan sa iyong pastulan, pader, bubong na gawa sa batong matalim. Binabakas na mga paa ang apog na nagbibigki sa bahay, tila gulugod. Dala namin mga libro patungong parola. Ang bakal na pinto'y binubuksan ng marahan, buong buo, ng babaeng galante na ang edad mahirap pulaan. Mukha niya'y maganda at magaspang. Mga halamang baging sa kanyang bakul, nakakwedro sa halakhak ang ginto niyang araw na tila umaawit sa isang hindi makakalimutang oktaba. Diyos mamahes, bakit ang tagal mong dumating?
Very good.
Can I add, if that were written by a traditional Mangyan, it would look like this. Okay, let's see.
That's their script, right?
That's their script, okay? And see, they are exactly 7 syllables. So they're all the same, 7 syllables per line. So each of those characters would be a syllable. And so there are 7 syllables.
Now, each character is a word. So they have a
Not
very...
a word, it's a syllable.
It's a syllable.
Sorry.
Syllable.
Right.
Yeah, and
So-
just since I've shown you what it looks like, I have samples of 2 tubes, old tubes, but with ambahans written on them. If you were to give me a piece of paper with a pen and tell me to write English, all the Ambahans here, I'm going to say I cannot do it. Yet a Mangyan carved this by hand. Okay? And it's all around. It's really amazing. Okay? Look at how tiny, and they use a knife to carve it on a bamboo pole, tube.
But the bamboo tube would still be the tree, or do they cut it and store?
they,
You know,
Well,
they
they
keep
cut
it.
it. They cut it, or like the first picture you saw was a living plant, with the carving there. Because for the Mangyans, I call it Mangyan graffiti, because they write their poetry in the woods for the next person to see. So it's, the just sharing something that it's like Quintin walking in the forest and writes his poetry without signing his name, because the Mangyans feel everything is community property. It belongs to anyone. If you like it, copy it, use it, write it to someone else. It doesn't matter. Their name isn't there.
Collective ownership.
Collective ownership. Like land, it's community property.
Yeah. But Professor Castro, is there any that language of the Mangyans? Is there anything similar etymologically with other tribes or other, maybe Indo? I don't know. I'm just thinking Indo-European
Well,
languages.
it's part of the Austronesian family of languages, just like Tagalog is. So in the past, before the Spanish came to the Philippines, we also had our indigenous script. Among the Tagalogs, it's called Baybayin. So it's the same thing. One character is a syllable. That's why it's not an alphabet but a syllabary. But for the Tagalogs, eventually it disappeared. The last ones was in the early 19th century, but eventually it was eradicated and shifted to the Latin script. But what's good with the Hanunuo Mangyan is that they have continued the practice of writing through Surat Mangyan, or the Hanunuo Mangyan script.
Yeah, Bambina, if I could just add, thanks to Tita Lolita, Quintin, and the Mangyan Heritage Center, I do have this laminated thing that I bring with me where I can. And if you see it, it basically is the syllabary. So you can actually write your name more easily. And then after that, the facility of writing with it becomes more natural. And then it's something that I enjoy doing when I can. But it's something I'm sure the third and fourth generation of Hanunuo Mangyan will enjoy doing as well, because now that we're seeing how valuable it is. And just a bit of background also, I was based in Indonesia for a couple of years, and there's one I think indigenous community there. I think the Batak tribe, which is also Christianized, similar to the Philippines, a very isolated tribe, and their writing looks like this actually. So there's this nice affinity that you have. The geography hasn't been able to even explain, But at the end of the day, I think it's so nice to have a shared heritage that we're reviving.
Actually, we have a really shared heritage, even with India, because the Indic script went from India to Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines. So then we all had a script in all those countries that originated from India. And in 1603, a Spanish Jesuit documented over a dozen scripts in the Philippines. Over the centuries, all those Indic scripts that went to all these different countries changed to suit their own languages. So you will see that nothing looks exactly like the original Indic script, but each one transformed their own to suit their languages. So even here, the Mangyans, they can't read each other's scripts. The two that remain, they can't read each other's scripts because they're so different, because the languages are different. And so the affinity there is so vast. I mean, the American Indians don't even have their script. We had ours before the Spaniards came, and we lost them one by one. And the two Mangyan scripts remain because they were isolated and they were not tempted to give them up for the Roman alphabet or English and Spanish or Tagalog. But it unified the country because then they could read the Roman alphabet, because you could read Pampangueño without understanding the language. But with the script, when the Mangyans get together, they speak in Tagalog because they don't understand each other's languages. And this is just one island of Mangyans who don't consider themselves Mangyans because they have a name for each of their group.
Now, what I would find interesting is, so Quintin has written several poems in Ambahan style, and Danton has translated it into Filipino. If it is translated into Hanunuo Mangyan, will it still be recognized by the Hanunuo Mangyan as Ambahan?
Actually, the Mangyan Heritage Center transcribed into Mangyan Script the Tagalog because it's easier,
Yes.
poetry than English. Because in English, there are so many consonants.
So they have done
Tagalog
it for
very syllabic.
They have done it for all of Quintin's poems?
Yes, but the poem itself, they did not translate the poems. They translated the syllables into Mangyan.
But still
that
read
would
in
require
Filipino.
another step. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's like it would require another step to
Yes,
rewrite the poem. Whereas in Bamboo Whispers, the original was the Mangyan Ambahan. And then the original was then translated into English, Tagalog, and Spanish, Filipino and Spanish. Quintin wrote the poetry in English, and then this was translated into Tagalog. So all the Mangyan could do was to just write every Tagalog syllable into Mangyan syllabic script.
Thanks, Tita. If I could just add, I mean, you know what I've found also just hearing Danton do this. I mean, just the first time I've heard Danton recite it as well is that, the multiplicity of meaning and the versatility of the verse shows itself here. Because, I mean, I think my Tagalog is more decent than it was 5 years ago at least. But I recognize Danton's voice in reading my poem in Tagalog is so very different. It takes on a life of its own. In fact, I commented on the podcast, in Puma podcast, and I thank Robio Alampay, who's here today, for broadcasting it, is that your poetry sounds more beautiful because it's in Tagalog. So it takes a life of its own, and it flourishes that way. So I would imagine that if the Mangyans didn't just transcribe it, but also translated it, it would have its own identity and probably even much better because it's closer to the source. That's why I like this form, is because it's so versatile and so organic.
I have to say the conversational aspect of Ambahan came out in the Tagalog translation much more, because there was a little bit of a formality. I guess it's a function of the language, right? That came across in the English, in the original English. But in Danton's translations, it felt like, you were just talking to us and making, it had a conversational aspect, I think. So, like you said, it's versatile. It actually undergoes several layers of meaning, I think, and expression as you go from one language to another.
Yeah. Did you want to read again? I mean, did you want to try something else?
Yeah, let's do one more.
Okay, sige. So this one, not all poetry is doom and gloom and camarados and romance and stuff. So we're not trying to be the Typhoid Mary or the Walt Whitman of Ambahan, but I did want to share with you that Oscar Wilde did say that there is no sincere love than the love of food, and I know that because I gained like 20 pounds over that pandemic. But having said that, I'm going to make a pitch for what actually is more sincere, which is the love of alcohol, and that has been my companion through some tough days during lockdown. So this is actually an ode in the form of an ambahan. So I'm sure Danton will even do this better. But the poem is called Gin as Tonic. Gin as tonic. You're the last marriage after a coven of bad judgment. Your alchemy that transports and poetry that transforms. Provenance and rebellion wearing the seasons in each constellation of garnish. A sky of ice, a prism marinating me inside. So strangers will swoon over snooty peers, i.e. Scotch, as a artist statement smothers lipstick on a pig. But when all is discussed, distilled, and drunk, you simply taste good. I'm in Manila house now, so I'm going to have a gin after the reading. Danton, over to you.
Danton, how did you
Yeah, this one. I had to send a message to Quintin. I said, "Are you serious about this?" So he said, "Yeah, I really," because it's not like the other poems here. So this one is Anjin bilang tonic. Ikaw ang huling kasal. Matapos ang mga maling desisyon, ikaw ang mahika na maghahatid at tula na magbibigay ng bagong anyo. Pinanggalingan ka at rebelyon, suot ang mga panahon sa bawat konstelasyon ng dekorasyon. Isang langit ng yelo, isang prismo na nagbababad sa akin sa loob. Estranghero natutuwa sa masusungit na mga kasamahan habang ang salita ng isang artista ay parang lipstick sa bibig ng baboy. Kapag huminto na ang lahat, napag-usapan at nalasing na, ikaw pa rin ang tunay na masarap. So I just translated, ha?
Thanks, Danton.
Now, if you were to translate this into Mangyan, do they have the words for that? Is that part, the gin and tonic, is that part of their culture?
Yeah, the GSM, I think, is very popular in Bulalaco, Mindoro, last I checked.
Do you want to comment, Professor Castro?
Yes, many among our indigenous people, they have already adapted to the ways of lowlanders. So gin is highly valued by the Mangyans themselves. In the past, of course, there was an indigenous form of liquor, but because gin is more accessible, they could easily buy it. So they use it to appease spirits as well as to enjoy life, just like what Quintin did.
Yeah, and just quick story, side story is Nestor and I have had long engagements with the Ikalinga in 9 sub-tribes and really what really helped there, because we had to eat everything from, I'm sorry for the canine lovers, we had to eat everything from dogs to carabaos in our engagement. The gin really helped wash it down quite well. Thank you.
I think Lolita, you wanted to say something. Okay, I think your sound is not.
She's frozen right now.
You're frozen again.
Yeah, well, the Mayans really are not like the Cordillera IPs. The Cordillera IPs have their tapuy. The Mangyans are really like the Mangyan Heritage Center. When we're there, we make it a point not to drink because we don't want to, upset the elders who still don't approve. It's unlike the Cordillera tribes that had their own tapuy. The Mangyans are really pretty, of course they're pretty good about not drinking. The young maybe, and those who live closer to the cities. But I would like to just show, and I just thought it was a good imagery of what is traditional and Quintin that's doing something modern. The book has this one as the pakudos, which is the, what do you call this? The ward the evil spirits away sign that the traditional Hanunuos had. And they replicated this in their baskets, their weaving, their clothing, etc. And Quintin's book features it. And now the young ones don't even know it was a ward the evil spirits away. It's like the Ojo de Dios, or the signs that the Greeks and the Turks have, the blue
The
and
evil
white.
eye.
So,
Yeah, the evil
Evil
eye.
eye.
yeah, all the evil eye, or ward the evil spirits away. So I look at this as the traditional Mangyan design that's very Hanunuo. And this one is modern. It's still Hanunuo. They still do it, but it was designed by an Indian woman, actually, because she wanted to export these.
Mhm.
And it's still Mangyan, very traditional way of doing it. So that's the way I feel, but it's not traditional, and it's different from this. There's more black than the traditional. So I think that Quintin's poems are like this modern basket. It's a new thing, but the Mangyan will still say it's Mangyan, because they will feel the seven-syllable rhythm of their poetry. So Quintin, you're this basket, and this is the traditional.
Quintin, why don't you show the cover, the book cover?
Oh yeah, okay, sure. So I have the digital copy here thanks to FEU. So this is copy number 0001.
And
So,
there's the Ambahan,
noted
the
yeah,
Kudos.
the Pakudas is here. You
Okay.
can see it. And Tita Lolita's wonderful dedication is at the end. Thank you.
And Professor Castro wrote the foreword, am I right? So
Yes, and then Danton wrote the translator's note as well. So the entire team is represented. Thank you.
you were saying about the syllables. So is there a set number of syllables? Is it an evolving language, the Hanunuo language? Or like, do they add syllables or something? Because you were saying like they had a hard time with were you saying English because it's consonant based?
Yeah, well, when they speak, it sounds like Tagalog insofar as Tagalog and Spanish is very syllabic. English has a lot of like two consonants together, or words ending in a consonant, which in Mangyan, lots of words do not end. Most of the words end with a vowel.
So
But the language is still spoken. Yeah, it's the written form that you have to put this line to take away the a, because you want to make it end in a vowel.
yeah. So each
Honest.
character is a consonant, and there will be diacritical marks to indicate whether what vowel is attached to that consonant. So it's either a ba or a b. So just like Baybayin or early Tagalog script. So the structure will be consonant vowel. So that's the traditional syllabic script. But of course, there was this introduction to put a mark. It's called a vowel killer, so that it becomes, instead of a ba, it's b. Okay. So, but this is an introduction that was introduced much later uh, in during the Spanish period. At least I know for the Baybayin, it was introduced by the Spanish because the Spanish had difficulty in reading it. It's not the Tagalogs having difficulty in reading it. Imagine how our millennials and our Generation Z people write with all dropping all these vowels and letters, but still they could understand one another. It's the same with our indigenous script.
Quintin showed the syllabary. I have a bigger version
Yeah.
here from our book. Yeah. And
This fits
this
in my
one,
shirt pocket. So yeah.
yeah, because anybody can write their names once you get the hang of it. when I go to a building and they make me sign in, I always sign in Mangyan, and then I tell the security guard, alam mo ito, sa atin ito. And of course, there's shock, right? But I print in Roman alphabet underneath. Or when I go to a wake and you have the book where you sign in, I sign my name in Mangyan, but I print my name in Roman letters underneath. It's just that I want Filipinos to know we have this script that's still there. We haven't lost it.
So can you write anything else in Mangyan, or you know your name?
I know my name well without thinking.
Yeah.
But if you ask me to write your name, I need the código that Quintin carries in his pocket.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's easy. Once you get the hang of it, it's easy enough to learn. But to memorize my name, since I write my name in 3 names with my maiden name, it took me a month to memorize it. Because it's not like you're learning, you're writing in the Roman alphabet a word that you never heard of. This one is a totally different script that you've never used. So it took me a month to learn, to memorize 3 names. So I like to use it as often as I can so I don't forget.
I just wanted to see, we could read a few more poems, I think, and translations. I think everybody wants to listen to more. But does anybody have any questions? If you have any questions, just put them in the chat box or in the Q&A box. And then we have a few more minutes. No, you could stay for another 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, I think we can read 2 to 3 more.
Why don't we do it a little differently? Danton, why don't you read out the translation, the one you like the best? I mean, your favorite of all. And then Quintin will read the original English.
Sounds good.
Why don't you choose like one of your favorites?
You know, my laptop just died. Wait. Sorry. sorry.
You don't want me to read the Tagalog ones for sure.
Yeah, just because I'm reading from my laptop. Okay. Yeah, it's okay now. So
It's
maybe Quintin can read.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, let me just get to one. I mean, obviously, this book was dedicated to my muse, but also my mother, who you will get to know through this poem quite well. No need to explain. I've been accused and pilloried as a mama's boy, but I kind of own the title, and I'm quite happy with that. So this is the poem. Every day is Mother's Day. So Mother's Day. I'm asked how I will miss you. What might be left after all this fading? I will say this. Every time I choose kind words over the throwaway barb, self-deprecation over the basement of self-pity. Each time I give, yet want for nothing, or pray, and find that my call is its own answer. Anytime I cook with grace, or fold the sheets, part my hair, stanch a cut, or floss my teeth. This sacred ordinary. When each glance at my beloved brings me to full redemption, where I learn to both hold on and let go, until the dark tides pass and the stars show the shore. Your face will always be there. All that remains is kindness.
yeah.
Translation, salin sa Filipino. Araw ng mga nanay. Kapag tinatanong kong nangungulila ako sa iyo, kung anong may iwan kapag nawala na ang lahat, itong sasabihin ko. Tuwing pinipili kong mabuting salita kaysa matalim na mga tinik, pagtawa sa sarili kaysa malublob sa pagkaawa sa sarili, tuwing ako'y nagbibigay, walang hinihingi o nagdarasal at napatutunayang ang tawag ay siya ring kasagutan. Habang nagluluto akong tila may biyaya o nagtutupi ng kumot o hinahati ang buhok, pinipigilan ng sugat o nilinisan ng ngipin, itong ordinaryong banal na bagay. Kung bawat tingin sa minamahal ay isang buong pagtutubos, kung saan natuto akong sabay na humawak at magpakawala, hanggang ang madilim na tubig ay dumaloy, ipakita ng mga bituin ng dalampasigan, laging nariyan ang iyong mukha. Lahat ng maiiwan ay kabutihan.
Kind of sums up what a mother is, right? That's beautiful in both languages, I have to say. Quintin, we want to just talk a little bit about your process.
Yeah.
When you started writing, this actually is Lolita's question, but did you plan to do it in Ambahan mode? How long have you been working on this collection?
Yeah, thanks for the question. This is actually like, it started out with a few lines. I like to say at the Bodleian Library when I had no money to spend because the pound to peso was 90:1. So I just had to write a lot in a library, and that's actually why I am the way I am. But that started the process, and then after that, by coming back home, speaking to Dr. Castro, Danton, coming to Mindoro, we have a small library that we were working on there with Quintin and Tita Lolita. I think that changed me because, as I mentioned in the chat, after that, the remaining poems were all in a band format. It's like I start thinking and counting my fingers, or counting with my toes sometimes when I'm at work sometimes. But at the end of the day, it is a way of thinking. So I can't write in anything but Ambahan. In fact, I think in Ambahan right now because Ambahan tends to be so structured in a way that your language tends to be a lot more tight that way. Even in PowerPoint presentations, my mind is doing Ambahan. So I'd say 2/3 of the book was already in Ambahan, but the first third I would be totally remiss if I didn't convert them, and they actually do sound better. Personally, they feel better and they read better in Ambahan because of the structure and the versatility. So it's a process of just thinking and then trying to keep it within the 7 syllables. It's like the philosopher Andre Gide said that art is born of constraint and dies of too much freedom. I really was a late convert to structured verse. I love free verse, and it's a great way of doing things. But tightening it with an indigenous form, that's where the magic happens. I really am thankful to FEU, to MHC, to the Mangyans themselves for doing that for me.
Well, the Mangyan Heritage Center is so grateful, Quintin, that you are doing what we've been working on, trying to encourage the young Mangyans to be proud of their script and their Ambahan, but also to get the urban Filipino lowlanders to try their hand with the Mangyan style, and you're doing it. So thank you from us for just being able to promote something that maybe many Filipinos will find a way of using also. I mean, instead of just free verse, to tighten it with the Ambahan style. So thank you.
Thank you.
But Ambahan doesn't follow a rhyme scheme, right?
No.
No. So
But in Tagalog, a lot of our words end with syllables, with vowels, much more than in English. So it's harder to rhyme in English than it is to rhyme in Spanish or Tagalog, simply because more words end with vowels. But no, there's no rhythm. When it's chanted, there's no pitch, there's no rhythm. When I tried to chant an Ambahan, because it's supposed to be free for all, do the way you want to. A woman would be higher pitched than a man, a child would go faster than an old person. So I thought, oh, it's easy. I was abroad when I thought I'd introduce them to a Mangyan Ambahan. When I chanted, it sounded like Gregorian chant, because That was my upbringing.
Could you give us a sample? Do you remember one or two lines in?
Oh no, I'm
No,
not
you
Mangyan. I'm not from Mindoro, and I come out with a Gregorian chant. Somebody answered me back and said, "Et cum spiritu tuo." So I knew, I can't get out of my Gregorian chant upbringing in school. I'm that old. We learned the Gregorian chant.
But Danton, I wanted to ask you, you're an award-winning poet. And what is your, do you feel now that you're a little more familiar with the Ambahan style, would you consider writing that instead of translating? I think your sound, you want to check your sound?
Anton?
I think he's frozen.
Living abroad and studying abroad really changes. Like when I came back, when I come back to the Philippines, I always have to translate into Tagalog because like I taught in a British university for 3 years. It's in Malaysia, but everyone is either British or British educated. So I had to translate. So I really want to write Filipino poems again. No? That's why uh, the last poems I've written were in English. So I'm actually translating my novel into Filipino now, no, for a publisher. So that's a start. But Ambahan and Quintin taught me are because you're correct, no, Bambina, about the haiku being 17 syllables in all. So this Ambahan tries to capture the heart, the breath, no, of a person as he or she chants or reads a line. So maybe when I write in the future, when I write poems in Tagalog or Filipino, I will try to follow. No? In my poetry in Filipino, I try to imitate the imagery of the Mangyan because their imagery is very elemental, very natural. Like water is compared to glass, no? Or river surface is compared to glass. Um, very, very simple and elemental. But when you really come think about it, it's really difficult to write simple and vivid imagery, which the Ambahan writers, the anonymous Ambahan writers, did very well. No, like in one of my columns, Philippine Historic, I said I was surprised because I was educated in the Western tradition and of course read haikus in English. Some of these Ambahans are as beautiful as the most beautiful haiku I've read. So that's one insight that I found in studying this Ambahan. They're really world class.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing your new poems, Danton. So we'll also do another launch. Oh, I hope we can do it in person and not just virtual by the time it's done. And Danton is the author of River Run, which is published by Penguin Asia, right? Penguin Random House. It's just out now in English. I think we maybe have time for one more if there are no other questions. Quintin would like to read a poem called Tough Love, which was written during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think I'd be remiss if we didn't have some contextual poetry on this pandemic. So I hope this will help. There's some of the poetry is political, and Danton felt that was one of the stronger ones, so I wanted to put this one in there. So here, Tough Love. This virus that knows no love trolls us all with its virtues. The imminence of a drip, the sturdiness of a cot, the courage of a bedpan, the nourishment of sleep, and the fidelity of death. It betrays any resilience, strips us down to mucosa, more swiftly than oxygen, outwitting and outrunning the best laid schemes of tyrants, the resistance of the damned through this awful grace of God. That's 2020.
Yeah, my translation, I told Quintin this is difficult to translate because of the modern words. Tigasing pag-ibig sa panahon ng corona. Hinahabol tayo ng virus na to na walang alam sa pag-ibig. sa katahimikan ng linya ng dextrose, sa katatagan ng katre, sa tapang ng deadpan, sa lusog galing sa pagtulog, sa katapatan ng kamatayan. Traidor, ayaw makabawi sa trahedya, pinupuntirya ang ating mukosa. Mabilis pa sa halakhak kong kumalat, nililinlang at nilalagpasan lahat ng maingat na plano ng mga mapang-api. Pakipagtunggali ng mga isinumpa sa pamamagitan ng nakamamanghang grasya ng Diyos.
Very powerful in both languages, I think. Okay, I think that's it for today. Professor, would you like to just say something before we close? I'll ask Lolita as well to say a few words before we close.
Well, again, I would like to congratulate Quintin and Danton for this remarkable work. As Bambina mentioned, it's very powerful. The images are very vivid. And I am almost sure that even the Hanunuo Mangyan will appreciate what Quintin has written. And Quintin has really elevated the localized Ambahan tradition to a more global setting. So with that, I think this is the strength of this publication.
Thank you. Thanks, Professor Castro. Lolita? Would you like to just say something in closing about maybe how the Mangyan tradition lives on with a contemporary kind of adaptation? I think you just have to unmute. Yes, yeah. Yeah, Lolita.
Sorry, my internet is so unstable that I didn't even catch your question. I'm sorry.
No. If you could just close, I mean, I think maybe to round it off, let's say like how the Mangyan tradition lives on with a kind of modern expression now, modern adaptation through these poets.
Well, you know, the one link for me is of course, is the 7 syllables that really makes it the Mangyan form. But the topic, of course, it's life, and that's always universal. But the expression of Quintin is that of a young, urban, well-traveled young man, younger than the ancient, the older Ambahans. But it's like this basket, you know. You have the pakudos, which and the modern. I really think that the spirit of the Mangyan stays there in Quintin's poetry. I'm still trying to match some of his poems with the old ones, and I was just thinking there's one which I also love, and I'll just quote the last two lines. It's an old man who wrote this to his wife, and he says, "When we'll meet again, it is not with mortal eyes, but with the eyesight of the soul." And I think Quintin says that in his other poems. I was just trying to find one that would fit those lines, but the spirit is there. It's like when we had an exhibit and we had artwork done by modern artists interpreting or expressing a Mangyan Ambahan. Most people looked at the poem, which was like, look at the fish in the creek, fine is the sand, you know. Anyway, it's a fish, and that's what people see. But this young Mangyan girl who was only up to grade school, couldn't read English, could read the Tagalog, but never wrote an Ambahan in her life, nor could she write the script. But she said immediately, "Oh, it's not about a fish. It's a young man who wrote this, trying to tell a girl he liked her." And here, everybody else thinks it was the fish, swimming in a clear river. But the Mangyan girl knew it without being able to really, she never read an Ambahan in her life, but it was there in her soul. And I think that's what Quintin captures, the soul that's there, that I think, of course, a Mangyan reading his poetry will not understand it because it's too modern for them. Like, what do they really know of gin and tonic? So maybe they won't understand it, but if they got the translation of Danton and got, what it was there, like anybody from another culture, poetry, process, countries and cultures, because you express your soul and we all have our souls. So, the modern version of Quintin is still promoting the Mangyan culture and heritage. And we're so grateful for that.
Thank you, Tita.
I think I froze for a bit. I just wanted to say, like, before we close, to say thank you. And this being the season, the holiday season, and during a pandemic where, a lot of people have suffered and our lives have changed, I'd like to thank, congratulations to Quintin and to Danton and for this wonderful book. And thank you to FEU for bringing it out, and Asian Society as well. And thank you to our panelists today. I think it also brings us a gift, a non-material gift, but I think just as fulfilling, is the gift of poetry and the gift of heritage, I think, which we have a lot to be proud of and we have a lot to be thankful for. So on that note, thank you so much to everyone for joining us. Thank you to all the Manila House members I see with us today. Please know that we're open for Christmas and for New Year's and all throughout. And you just refer to the website or to check your WhatsApps daily to see what's on offer for the holidays. And I think that's it from my part. And season's greetings to everybody. This is our last talk for the year. And I'm very delighted to end it with this panel. Again, a shout out to Asia Society and the FEU and Puma Podcast for making today happen. Quintin, would you like to maybe close today?
Yeah, I know. Babina, thank you for being such a fantastic host and really for having Manila House host this along with Puma Podcast, and really for FEU for putting this into such beautiful form. I really appreciate the chance you gave a first-time poet to do this, but more importantly, for taking a stab towards something that could lead towards other people not only discovering this form and other forms, but also making it more beautiful with the inherent talent that we have across our archipelago. So I really thank you for this opportunity, and I hope this spring will lead into a torrent of more good poetry. Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you.
Happy holidays. Thank you. This video will be up in a day or so on our YouTube channel, the Manila House YouTube channel. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the season. Bye. Thanks, guys.